Hello everyone and welcome back to another Sims Source Studio video. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So today we're finally creating something that has been heavily requested over pretty much all of my social media channels, which is just to create a family base game home. And I'm finally here to showcase that to you guys, and I'm super excited because I actually really was surprised with how close I was able to get the exterior shell to look as if it was like I was using packs or just like a regular family home, you know. So I started off by building this on a 40 by 30 lot within Brindleton Bay. Although it is a completely base game functional build in itself, I am building in the world of Brindleton Bay, which came with the expansion pack Cats and Dogs. And the main reason for that was because I just really like the environment that it's in, and this is pretty much one of my favorite worlds when it comes to creating and building in The Sims 4 anyway, especially when it comes to like families and stuff like that. And since I was trying to create a home that felt relatively huge and close to that 64 by 64 lot size, I feel like it kind of made sense to just build it in this world, and you guys can obviously place it wherever you guys want to when you guys download it within your games. But right now we're just starting off with this nice simple shell, and I kind of went with a farmhouse type look for the actual exterior because I thought it would look interesting for this build, especially since it kind of gave me the opportunity to add some extra little details here and there that I thought might look good. And it is a 2-story home that features around like 5 or 6 bedrooms and has pretty much quite a lot of different bathrooms spanning across this entire build. And we do also have a small little gym area along with like the garage area off to the side that actually is very small. It doesn't even look like a garage area. It just houses some nice basic little workstations and tabletops and stuff like that, so that your Sims can actually have like some functional objects to use. And the front of the home actually looks super appealing to me for some reason. I don't know why. I didn't actually go off of any specific individual reference images as I usually do for my builds, but I feel like that kind of just added to the uniqueness that this build has to offer. And the backyard area of the home as well, I just feel like it's like a perfect size and just looks nice and complete, and it does fit the style that we're trying to go for. Like, I feel like it definitely does make sense, so you're not really getting that really big mixture of like one side looks super modern and then the other side looks so traditional or like too farmhousey, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I kind of went with this nice iron detailed sort of like texture for the roofing itself, and I just like that one in particular. It just is a nice contrast between it being like a dark color for the roof, but it's also not like a pitch black color to the point where it just like contrasts way too heavily with the rest of the colors that we have going on for the exterior, such as the walls and stuff. And I did end up using this plain white wall for the exterior, and you guys already know that I pretty much go for these types of plain white walls in all of my builds, regardless of whether it's a base game build or not, because I just like the simplicity on the contrast that it does provide to the build overall. And to make certain parts of the peak roofs around this entire build look and feel a little bit more appealing and interesting, I just added these additional gabled roofs but made them a lot more smaller to pretend as if there was like some additional wood framing like support within the actual like roof itself. And I'm not sure where I seen this from or who actually created this initially in The Sims 4, but I just really loved that idea and I wanted to recreate something like that in this build, and I feel like it definitely did work out, especially since we are trying to go for that more farmhousey vibe. And right now we're just trying to figure out what kind of fence postings we want to use, some nice columns, as well as the windows as well. I feel like The Sims 4 base game definitely has come a long way when it comes to like some more modern and unique features to incorporate within your builds. However, I do definitely feel like there still isn't enough for a over 10-year-old game to actually create a proper house that feels like one specific style, if that makes sense. I feel like there's still a lot, like a very long way to go. However, I did end up using some of the modern windows that came from the recent base game update, and I just feel like they work super nicely for this build, especially since we are going for definitely a more modern theme than a traditional one, which is kind of like tricky once we move on to the furnishing in the interior, because I did try to pick some more modern styled furniture pieces and I feel like it was relatively tricky without any of the expansion packs. And here is where we actually have one of those small little fake garage areas, and I ended up just using this paneled walls to create some sort of fake driveway garage door, which I feel like actually didn't work out too badly, especially since it has those default lines that are very generic when it comes to these like garage ways and stuff like that. And for the main pathways and stuff like that, I ended up using obviously one of my favorite pebble textures when it comes to like the terrain painting and stuff like that. And I was actually really thankful that none of my terrain paint actually got affected within this build, because if you guys aren't aware, there is actually a bug going on currently that has been existing for a while, where it just like deletes your terrain paint, or like it replaces it with a different terrain paint when you're like actually editing and stuff like that, and it's kind of annoying. But thankfully, while I was building this, I didn't actually come across that issue. But I just really love the location of this lot. It feels kind of privatized, yet also like very expansive, but at the same time, it also feels really compact. So although the home is relatively huge, I still feel like we don't really have a very big backyard area, which I'm actually kind of thankful for this build in particular, because if you guys already know, in the base game, there's not really that many objects to actually put in the like backyard area. Like you guys would see as we progress into the furnishings of this build, I feel like there wasn't really a lot that we could have really added to the backyard area, just like a few small seating areas here and there. And since the backyard area of this build felt a lot more privatized than the front area of the home, we did end up using some more taller, bigger structured windows throughout the entire build. So just like trying to use stuff that felt and looked a little bit more modern and open, because I really wanted to have that indoor outdoor feel with this build. So I just ended up using some of these nice simple medium wall height glass windows, as well as using the very nice sliding glass doors, which also came in a recent base game update, while also using the floor to ceiling glass walls that actually came in that wallpaper swatches. And I just really love the combination of both of these different windows just merged into this home. It just like makes it feel very complete and unique at the same time. And I also ended up going for this really thick roof like detailing around like the frames and stuff. I feel like that definitely does add a bit more detailing to the build overall, especially if you guys are trying to make your builds look a bit more appealing and interesting. I feel like it definitely does help. And once again, just adding that additional little sort of like support into the roof towards certain parts of the gabled roof pieces around the entire build. Once again, doing it in this small little single story area, which I just love the overall look of it. And we make the foundation as well as the columns just like blend in super nicely with the foliage that we add on, which gives it like a very cool look. And I just love the overall vibe of this build. So for the backyard area of this build, where we have this huge balcony, I knew I wanted to have a nice huge long glass railing, but you can't really do that with the base game. So I ended up using one of my favorite tricks, which I actually showcased in a very old video of mine, where you place this glass fencing, and then in between each of the other glass fencing pieces you add a different fence piece, and then you select the auto fence place button, which actually comes right beneath all of the options, and it actually places it in a very nice line where it gets rid of all of the small little individual columns in between the fence pieces. Now, although it isn't a really perfect method of getting like a nice clean straight glass railing, I still feel like it definitely is a lot better than having a lot of those small little support pieces in between it, which I feel like wouldn't really look that appealing for this build in my opinion, especially since I'm trying to go for a more minimalistic modern approach. I don't want to have too many details going on, but once again, it isn't a really perfect solution. However, I still feel like it is a lot better than the rest of the base game fencing pieces and options that we have in the game currently. And the backyard area mainly consists of this nice simple stone patio flooring. I didn't want to use anything too detailed because I feel like we didn't really have a lot of options anyway when it came to creating something that felt a little bit more modern. And I also ended up placing a small pool area in the center of the backyard just to add some extra functionality to this build, and of course place some small little pathways here and there to make it feel nice and complete and connected with the rest of the build. And moving back to the front end area of the home, you guys can see a small little terrain paint and detailing and stuff like that, and here is actually where I ended up adding some of the foliage pieces throughout this entire build. However, I don't actually end up showcasing me placing all of that because I feel like it definitely does get a bit tedious, especially since I do end up trying to add as many unique pieces as much as possible. And since I haven't really worked with just the base game in a while, it does take a bit of time to just like think about what I wanted to really use. And in case you guys are wondering, like if you guys do also use the base game only and wonder how my catalog looks a little bit bigger than usual, it might be because I am using the better build by mod, which does end up allowing some of the debug objects and live edit objects to be placed within the regular categories themselves as well. But right now we're just adding some small little half walls around the backyard area of the build as well, because instead of using a bunch of different fencing pieces, I wanted to use some nice minimalistic simple looking half walls, and of course added some clean sophisticated looking greenery pieces throughout the backyard area of the build, not cluttering up too much but just enough to make it feel realistic as possible, while also maintaining that nice tranquil vibe that I wanted throughout this entire build. And of course going around all of these small little greenery patches as well as all of the plants and vases, and just adding some nice little terrain paints beneath them to make it feel a little bit more realistic. And was finally starting off by adding some of the furniture pieces into the backyard area of this build with this small individual seating area that is actually connected connected to where we have one of the first floor bedrooms. And once again, just adding a nice little fireplace in the center, as well as like some nice simple little seating areas off to the side. I just feel like it felt cozy to add a little seating area that was dedicated to that bedroom. And on the other side of this backyard area, we have a huge outdoor kitchen area. So I ended up using some of the more recent items that came in the base game, such as the event bin and the kitchen cabinets that look super modern and sleek, on top of incorporating that nice and simple barbecue right in the center in between those kitchen cabinets. And I actually ended up realizing at this point that we didn't actually have a lot to work with. So I ended up using some of the objects that actually came from the event, such as this huge outdoor dining table along with the chairs as well. I just really love that wooden combination. It just works super nicely with that really modern cabinetries and tiles, along with like that very rustic dining table area. It just looks super cozy and interesting. Of course, adding some extra foliage pieces here and there, such as these nice simple aloe vera plants. And I also ended up adding some additional furniture pieces around the actual foundation areas where we have the backyard, along with the balcony area itself, because I didn't want to leave it empty. I feel like that would have made it feel a little bit too plain for my liking. So I just added some nice basic looking outdoor furniture pieces that I felt looked kind of appropriate. Even though we don't have any dedicated furniture pieces for the outdoors in the base game, I still wanted to incorporate something that felt a little bit more representative of that. And I feel like it kind of worked out nicely in the end, despite having very limited options. But yeah, so now we're finally moving on into the interior now, and we have that very huge entrance doorway, and I just love how it looks, especially with this huge hallway that it ends up leading it up to. And we also have the staircase right next to where we have the entrance as well. And I kind of just wanted to have a nice little entrance table off to the side, so I just placed a side table that looked relatively mid-century modern, and I ended up using these very tall mirrors stacked next to each other as well. I feel like it worked very nicely with the current setup that I was trying to go for, especially since I wanted to have a very grand vibe to this entrance. I feel like that was the best way I was kind of getting that across. So we're finally moving on into incorporating the kitchen into this build, and we're starting off by using these very modern, luxurious looking kitchen cabinet pieces. And even if I was using packs for this build, I probably would have still went for these kitchen cabinet pieces. I feel like they've become one of my favorite throughout this entire game, because I just love the contrast that it has between both of the colors for the countertop and the cabinets themselves. And they also look very modern and sleek, which I feel like is very appropriate for a lot of the builds that I tend to create in The Sims 4. And since I have gone for a very bright birch looking flooring, I kind of wanted something that also matched that with the rest of the kitchen itself, while also adding a bit of contrast to it. So I ended up going for the white countertops with the birch/beige cabinets themselves, and I really love the contrast that it gives to this kitchen overall. And once again, just going around the entire build, of course adding a bunch of different unique pendant lights in each of the individual rooms as well, because I wanted to ensure that even though we are quite limited, I wanted to ensure that I was using as many of the unique pendant lightings that we had in the game as much as possible. And since we had such a huge floor plan to work with, I wanted to kind of make the kitchen area like not feel separate from the rest of the build, but also like have its own space. So I kind of just placed these walls on either side of the island counters themselves, and it kind of just made it feel like it's in its own section of the build, if that makes sense. And I really love incorporating that stovetop right in the center of the island counter with that floating fire range hood right on top of it. It just feels super grand and luxurious, which is kind of like the main goal of this build. And once again, moving on into the little dining table area that we have off to the side of this kitchen, I kind of just wanted to place it next to where we had these huge glass sliding doors. I feel like it kind of made sense just like have as much natural lighting where we have the dining table area. I feel like it's very generic when it comes to real life homes to just like house a dining table space next to these huge glass windows or like huge sliding glass doors that lead you out to your backyard area. So I wanted to recreate something like that within this build in particular. And I know I don't really show all of my floor plans as I'm progressing throughout most of my builds. However, it kind of just is to save time, but you guys can pretty much get a small little gist of what it kind of looks like as we pan around throughout all of the build and just like place small little furniture pieces here and there throughout all of the rooms. I feel like it does kind of get it across. However, if you guys are interested in actually seeing what the entire house and the floor plan looks like, I highly recommend you guys stick around towards the end of the video where I provide a tour which pretty much goes throughout all of the builds and the rooms, so you guys can pretty much get a gist of what everything looks like and just like showcases all of the rooms individually. And it also provides a bird's eye view of all of the actual floor plan for us. So yeah, I feel like it's like a very nice way of showcasing the entire build overall once it's complete. But But yeah, so we're finally moving on into the living space area, and it's kind of hard to say that, especially since it is just incorporated within this huge empty space. But I didn't actually like it that it was on that side of the wall, to the point where we just ended up moving on the other side. I feel like it felt a little bit more feng shui, if that makes sense, because it kind of just like leads you down into that hallway area without having to interrupt your actual like flow of walking. I feel like it would make a lot more sense as we progress and like actually complete the actual living space, because had I kept the living space on the other side, I feel like the sim would have had to walk around it, whereas while it's simply tucked into this small little section of the space where we have it next to the kitchen area, you guys can obviously direct yourselves straight into the other rooms that we have featured on the first floor, which I feel like makes a lot more sense this way. And I actually really love the overall end result of it. And I know I've been saying this throughout the entire speedbuild, but I genuinely feel like we really didn't have a lot to work with when it came to adding coffee tables or like seating areas throughout this entire build. And I just ended up using some of these simple three-seaters, and I just merged them together to try to create some sort of L-shaped lounge seating area. And I also ended up using some of the matching armchairs that came with it. And we were kind of limited when it came to the coffee tables and chairs themselves, but I still wanted to just like ensure that I used some objects that I felt matched as best as possible. I feel like there weren't a lot of options that felt like were appropriate within this location, but I feel like there wasn't really much to do about it. So I just tried to use something that felt like it kind of made sense within this environment. But I just really love this huge grand fireplace that we ended up placing, and I actually really love that huge TV that we also have in the base game as well. It's pretty much my very go-to ones when it comes to creating a grand living space like this. If you guys wanted to add and expand on top of it, I feel like it definitely does have a lot of opportunity for this build to become like a bit more detailed and a bit more interesting, with a few CC objects here and there, or some additional expansion packs if you guys do have them. But yeah, so we're finally moving on into the gym area that this build has to offer, and I feel like we place it in a very sizable space, and I just really love the overall end result of it, especially since it feels very connected with the rest of the build, with it having that huge sliding glass door that leads you into your backyard area. And of course just ended up using as many of the gym equipment that we already have in the base game. And we're finally moving on into that small little garage area, which as you guys can already see, it's a relatively small space. It doesn't even look like it would probably be appropriate for being like used as a garage, but I still wanted to incorporate something like that within this build, just to ensure that there was some additional functionality added to this build. But yeah, so we're finally moving on into this very spacious office area off to the other side of the build, where we pretty much house everything that you would probably expect with an office, starting off by placing a very spacious desk right in the center of the room itself. And I just really love these huge floor to ceiling glass windows. I feel like it wouldn't have been very practical in real life to have glass windows glaring down onto your screen. However, since it's a Sims, I didn't really mind it too much. And once again, just trying to place some more functional object pieces throughout the room itself, such as like a nice small little bookshelf area, as well as an easel. And of course, just trying to make it feel very formal with those two seaters right in front of where we have the desk itself. And I feel like I definitely ended up using a combination between the more traditional and more modern furniture pieces that the game has to offer. And I feel like it worked out very nicely in the end with the combination of the two. And of course, using that very modern rug that came with a recent base game update. And I also really like the combination of adding the fireplace in the TV area. I feel like it definitely does help with making the room feel super cozy. And to add some small little details here and there, I just decided to add some nice little curtains on all of the windows to make them feel as complete as possible, which is pretty much what I did for all of the rooms, because I feel like since we don't really have a lot of objects to work with, I feel like it makes it feel a little bit more complete with adding these extra details on the walls and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like it definitely did help with making the room feel as unique as possible. But yeah, so now we're moving on into the second floor now, which is where we house this very spacious bedroom off the side of the build. And it pretty much has its own private access into that huge balcony area, and pretty much can be classified as one of the primary bedroom suites, although we do actually have another one right next to it. I kind of went with a more modern sort of approach for this bedroom in particular, because I kind of wanted each of the bedrooms to have their own unique style and taste. Despite being very limited on specific styles and stuff like that, I wanted to just like make it feel and resemble a more modern minimalistic approach. So we kind of use these more simple, bright, open, airy looking color swatches for all of the furniture pieces, of course going for a more blue and white color scheme. So I just added these matching bedside lamps along with this unique pendant light. and of course adding some curtains on some of the windows, on top of adding the dresser and the mirror. And I feel like since we had quite a lot of space to work with, I wanted to also incorporate a desk within this room itself as well. So just using some of the more modern features and just going for this nice simple glass desk, which I feel like made it feel nice and complete off to the side of the room. And of course they do also have their own small ensuite, and that is pretty much the case for all of the bedrooms that we have on the second floor as well as the first floor, to be honest. But yeah, so we're finally moving on into the primary bedroom suite, and I really love this overall look and design for this bedroom. I like also how they have a lot of glass and natural lighting coming into this room itself. It just feels very grand and luxurious, especially with how it just like has that little poke out section throughout the actual main compartment of the build. It just feels super grand in my opinion. And of course they also have that private access into that huge balcony area that we had seen in the exterior, which also feels very grand and luxurious. So I ended up going for a more brighter color scheme for this bedroom in particular. So I ended up using one of my favorite Basegame beds, which is this very modern minimalistic wooden frame on both sides, and it also has some more appropriate cover sheets with the color schemes and stuff like that. So I ended up going for these very minimalistic simple drawers for the bedside tables themselves. They feel like the most appropriate and very common in real life as well, so I feel like it worked. Plain white walls can tend to become very tedious in The Sims 4, especially since they look very plain and simple, but I feel like just by like adding some small sconces or a few paintings or like a few wall decals and details definitely does help break that illusion apart, and I feel like it did work out very nicely in the end overall. And of course this bedroom does also have its own ensuite as well, and I just tried to make it feel a little bit more different to the rest of the ensuites and bathrooms that we have. But yeah, so we're finally moving on into the nursery room that this build has to offer, and I started off by placing this modern little crib right in the center of where we have these huge floor to ceiling glass windows. And I kind of just tried to create something that I would typically create with packs, which is where I place like a small little rocking chair in the corner of the room with like little bookshelves, as well as like some nice little shelving unit pieces with some little details for like the nursery and stuff like that here and there. So I started off by placing this small little chair off to the corner of this room, along with adding the bookshelf right next to it as well. And I ended up adding some additional shelving pieces on top of the walls to add some extra details and clutter pieces, and of course added some small little toys here and there throughout the room itself as well to make it feel as complete as possible. And I feel like it definitely did turn out nicely overall, especially since we don't actually have the changing table in the base game, which I feel like is kind of like a very fundamental thing within the game. But I feel like even though we don't really have something like that, I still wanted to incorporate some small little details here and there to make it feel as like appropriate for a nursery as possible, along with changing some of the pendant lighting fixtures, and of course going back into the room later on as well to add some nice simple curtains along the windows as well, because I feel like there is quite a lot of natural lighting going into that nursery. But yeah, so we're finally moving on into the hallway areas and the extra small little spaces that we ended up not really decorating as we're progressing throughout the speed build. So I just added some small little details into the hallways themselves to make them feel as complete as possible, because I feel like we do actually have quite a lot of these huge empty spaces that I wanted to ensure that felt relatively furnished. And we do end up moving down into the first floor to move that office space and actually replace the initial office area with a small little bedroom, which I do showcase towards the end of the speed build. But yeah, so that is pretty much it that this speed build has to offer. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below what your thoughts and suggestions are about this build. And I do also have a bunch of videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in builds like these. I'll link them on the right hand side of your screens. But thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.